and I'm a financial I was about to call myself a financial advisor. I'm a specialist analyst from within the Financial Advisors and Intermediaries division, and I am joined by my colleagues from the Investment Providers division. I would like to disclaim that the material that we are going to cover here covers all the categories 1 through to 4. And that this will be applicable to all the FSPs. I know we heard there was a question where someone said that why are FSPs here? It's so that FSPs understand what a contravention looks like and when they are in fact contravening the law and when it is reportable. So it is very important that you don't log out and you don't think this is not relevant for you and for your compliance officer to tell you everything. You need to take the responsibility of understanding the requirements that are expected from you, and that you make sure that you are compliant in your authorization, and that the people that you have as representatives under your license and the key individuals that you have are fit and proper and meet all the sub-regulations and regulations of the financials of the FASE Act. So just before we go into the Section 17 Irregularity Guidelines, so Matshidiso would have covered the Section 19 Irregularity Reporting, which refers to the irregularity reporting that is lodged by the auditors. So this is now the irregularity reporting that is lodged by our compliance officers, both internal and external. So it's important to know that if you are an internal compliance officer, you need to ensure that you maintain your independence and you are still in a place where you are able to objectively identify things that are inexcusable non-compliances that have to be reported immediately, and that you are able to identify even any compliances that you may then oversee over a period of time, and you are able to engage with the FSP, and that you have been given the autonomy to advise and supervise the FSP accordingly. Where you feel that your independence is compromised, it may be worth reporting this to the authority, and it also may be worth finding other support in ensuring that support from either management in ensuring that your position remains independent and that it is respected as one of authority and supervision. So Matshidiso went into, in the definitions, unpacked that Section 17(1)(c) of the FASE Act that relates to the reporting that is expected of a compliance officer needs to be read together with Section 19(4), 5, and 6, meaning that where the sections refer to auditor, you change that to compliance officer and you apply that to yourself accordingly. And what these sections now unpack and what they say is that a compliance officer must inform the FSCA in writing of any existing irregularity and any suspected irregularity. So the irregularity doesn't have to be evidenced by much. As soon as your professional judgment tells you that there is something untoward that is happening, that in the conduct of the FSP or in the affairs of the FSP, it is important that you alert the FSCA and you let us know if it is a confirmed non-compliance or if it is a suspected non-compliance. And where it is confirmed, we will appreciate that you give us all the evidence that you have gathered. And where the irregularity is unconfirmed and it's only suspected and you just have a few events, we would like you to then, in the reporting, relay the things that led to your suspicion. Give us all the details, as much details as you have, and then we will then engage in our own investigations as the FSCA. We do have, depending on the materiality of the matter that is being put to us, we will then allocate the correct resources for that particular irregularity. And again, when we talk about a reportable or immediately reportable irregularity, we are then referring to the irregularities that are deemed as material. And materiality refers to whether something has a huge impact or whether something is contravening a law that will impact clients or the industry in a material manner. Could you please just give me 5 seconds? I'm just seeing that my charger is not connecting and I can see the screen is muting. I wouldn't want to shut down on you. So please just bear with me for 5 seconds. I just need to make sure that my power is on. Thank you for your patience. We have sorted out the power issue. My bar was very low and I was just afraid that the laptop was going to shut down while I'm still talking to you guys. Please go back to the previous one. Yes. Thank you. While we are on here, so again, the irregularity that we are referring to must be addressed in through the appropriate channels. It must be lodged through the appropriate channels. Please do not send an email to the inquiries division. Do not send an email to, you know, an analyst or whoever that you know in the FSCA. You need to submit the report through the right channels and through the e-portal where you are a compliance officer of that particular FSP, and where you are not, then you need to send it through the complaints channel. So it's very important that we understand how you are reporting. When you do send it through that channel, it is noted as an irregularity where you have stated that this is a Section 17 irregularity. So please ensure that you follow the right processes for irregularities so that we can address them appropriately. When you send them to inquiry lines and and to channels that are not necessarily for this forum, they may not get the attention that they need in the timing that they need. So it is important to note that, but I will unpack the procedures to follow and the processes that you need to follow in the later slides. And then again, anything that is deemed as material, Matshidiso went into materiality and what it means for something to be material. Anything that is deemed as material per your assessment as a compliance officer needs to be reported immediately. It cannot be something that you delay. Events that can be delayed are events of non-compliances where you know that the impact of this non-compliance not being reported to the FSCA immediately is not going to hurt anyone. It's not going to hurt the clients. It's not going to hurt the authorization of the FSP. It is also not going to hurt the industry and the reputation of any other service providers. So it is important that you note from the materiality point of view which of the non-compliances that you can supervise over time and allow the FSP sufficient time to go through to remediate before you report. Okay. And again, one of the biggest reasons why we rely on you as compliance officers to report is so that you can assist us in actually picking up the trends of non-compliances that are occurring in the industry. Because we are not on the ground, we are in the unfortunate place that we only get information as we receive it, except for in instances where we have had first-hand experience ourselves. So as consumers of the financial industry products ourselves, we do come across some things that we do see that are not in accordance with the regulations. However, these things cannot be exhaustive and we will not have as much oversight as a client as you would have as a compliance officer. So it is very important. I saw a question in the chat box earlier where it says, is it necessary to report? Yes, it is necessary to report. The provisions of the Act, you may note, refer to must and not may. So everything that we say happens here is must. It is reportable, it is mandatory. It means that it is an obligation as a compliance officer to report something as you see it, because that is the main reason why you became compliance officer, to assist the FSPs in assessing their own compliance and in fixing their own compliance requirements. It is not your duty to comply on the FSP's behalf, but to guide the FSP in ensuring that they ensuring that they meet up with their compliance requirements. We can move on to the next one. Thank you, Tapo. So a compliance officer must, so you note the must there. It is not a choice. It is not something you get to think about or consider if you feel like reporting. A compliance officer must report irregularity to the client as well as to the FSCA, so that the client actually knows that they are conducting themselves in a manner that translates to an irregularity. Some clients are very unaware of the law. They have just gotten their license, they did what they needed to do, they got their REs and they passed, but they do not go further into understanding their daily requirements. So you do get some FSPs that may not know that they are actually contravening an act. So it is very important that you, as soon as you find an irregularity, whether immaterial or not, you alert the FSP of this irregularity, so that they are then aware that what I am doing is not authorized or is not lawful, and then I may be in a position then to fix it. That affords the FSP the chance to remediate what they have not complied with. And then it is also important to note that if the compliance officer that is looking after the FSP is under supervision, they need to also alert their supervisor of this transgression and this non-compliance with the Act and any of the sub-legislations that relate to the FSP. Without any delay. And they need to then ensure that this is immediately reportable to us. And if the FSP, in the period that the compliance officer may have lodged the irregularity report to the FSCA, has made some strides in actually remediating some of these non-compliances, you are also welcome to also submit that we have alerted our FSP of this transgression and they have made these efforts in remediating. However, there's still this and this and that is outstanding. And then the analyst that this irregularity is allocated to will then take the irregularity matter from where you have given us. If there's any further information we require from you as a compliance officer, we will relay back to you as a compliance officer, and we can ask for more details, and then we will engage the FSP. So again, there's also a guideline on the reporting material irregularities that was published by the Compliance Institute of South Africa that you can refer to for additional information and additional examples, because very often the gray area that exists is that a lot of people do not know if something is material or not material, or perhaps if they're being hard on the FSP. And for that test, if you are not sure of your own judgment or you haven't exercised it yet, especially for newer compliance officers that may not have a threshold of what is deemed as material or not, it is important that you get as much information as you can and you go to those guidelines and you educate yourself and you inform yourself. And that is when over time you will then have the experience and the gut feel of what feels off and what is material to you. And then when it comes to the delayed reporting, these refer to the lesser and like the non-compliance of a less serious nature, which includes but is not limited to notifying the FSCA of a change of name or address or management change, if this change will not have a material impact on the clients, and that the clients are made aware it was just forgetfulness on the FSP side. The CIPC name has been changed appropriately and the names are authorized and it is engaging with the clients as such. However, it is very important that before an FSP engages in a new name, that new name is approved by the FSCA, because if the FSCA has you as ABC Limited and you have now changed to EFG Limited and you are using that ABC license as your authorization, that is misrepresentation, and that in that case would be material. So a change of name would refer to someone changing a name from their maiden name. You get one of your representative is married, changes from Potgieter to Zuma, and that is now the surname that they have. Their ID number remains the same. So the transgression is not so much. It is just a forgetfulness in changing the name, that we have the correct the correct name on our records. However, the ID name, the ID number and everything else remains the same. Their qualifications remains the same and they are not affected. So in that manner, that would be something that you allow the FSP time to remediate. And because the period is 15 days from the change, as a compliance officer, you will then determine the amount of time that you allow an FSP. You will not allow them a quarter to remediate something that they should have remediated within 15 days of that change. So where it is a profile change or profile change related, you will afford them that 15 days and say that, guys, you were supposed to report this within 15 days of the change. Please ensure that you remediate this by end of week and report back to me. That is the kind of leverage that you have as a compliance officer, that you may exercise to your discretion the amount of time that you will afford an FSP. Where perhaps it relates to a policy, say the FSP has a governance framework in place, they have policies that are in place and everything is in order. However, there are a few things such as perhaps the definition that needs to be included based on a change that happened in the general code or the determination of fit and proper or any other act that governs the FSP. Something such as a paragraph that needs to be added or something that needs to be updated or something that is minor, that you can allow an FSP the quarterly period that you have for them to remediate, so that in the next quarter you can then assess if the policies then meet your standards as your standards that you have set in accordance with the laws that we have set as the FSCA. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. So the method of submission, that earlier I alluded to the fact that the irregularity has to be submitted in the correct format. We've had, compliance officers that send us emails with no details and they don't even have the correct details of the FSP and the participants involved. This is not the forum that you're going to follow. It will be through the e-portal if you are the compliance officer of that FSP. And then we need to ensure that it is in writing, it is electronic, so that there is paper trail, there is an electronic trail that we can follow, and that there is a reference number that will be generated for you. Because even as a compliance officer, you need to have the comfort that what you have lodged is in place, and that there is somewhere for you to follow up on whether the irregularity has been remediated or not. And then another method that you may use if you don't have access to electronic an electronic device or forum, is to submit this in hard copy together with the supporting documents to our offices. So you would come to our offices or post them to our offices. And you would need to ensure that the correct details are there. Your details as compliance officer are there. Your practice number, everything that is required from an irregularity report is there. You need to have downloaded the declaration form, sign it, and say that you are declaring that everything that is there is factual. It's what you understand, what you know, where it is suspected. You will tell us that this is what you suspect, so that we know if it's an actual irregularity or if it's a suspicion. So now you may wonder what happens after you lodge an irregularity report with the authority. So basically what will happen is, as soon as you have lodged your report on the e-portal and attached your supporting documents as well, the information that you've logged there will generate a number which we call a case number. That case number will be allocated to the analyst that is responsible for that particular FSP. They will then assess the information that is in the document. If there are any other questions that come up as a follow-up to the matters that you have raised in the irregularity report, the analyst involved will then request further information from the compliance officer where necessary. Where the information that may be lacking, that may follow up, that we may need, may only be acquired from the FSP, then the particular analyst will seek the additional information with the FSP before they can ascertain which laws have been contravened and which laws, which laws have been are still in place. So then the analyst will then go hand in hand with the report that you've given, with the whether it's suspected or actual, and analyze line by line what they identify as an irregularity. So you need to just relate the story and the occurrences and give scenarios of the things that occurred that led to you lodging this irregularity. And we go through all of that line by line, and then we will then say that section 10 has been contravened here, section 19.3 has been contravened, and section this has been contravened, as well as this act, as well as this act. And then that is when we will take it up in those particular sections, and then we will then engage the FSP for because you would have informed them for any for their updated documentation or any updated information that we need. And then we will get to assess. So say if the irregularity was with regards to a compliance officer saying my FSP does not have a governance framework at all. They do not have any policies, and I have engaged with them over the first quarter of my engagement, and nothing has been done to date. In that instance, we will then follow up with the FSP to see that in the interim, have they actually tried to draw up some kind of, start up some kind of, governance framework? Have they actually started compiling any of these policies? And once we see the policies, we will then, if they have, say, remediated and they now have policies that they have now compiled, we will then assess these policies as part of this irregularity report. Check if because now the irregularity, sorry, my tongue keeps rolling on this irregularity. The irregularity that has been lodged relates to the governance framework not being in place. Now that the FSP submits this governance framework or the policies that it has within its governance framework, we then assess that because there was nothing at first, we now have to assess according to the legislation if all the requirements of the legislation are met, and if the technical compliance of those policies are correct. We will then, as part of this, assist the FSP in fine-tuning the other areas where they may still need to improve upon certain things or things that are still not addressed in those policies. And we also check that those policies are in accordance with the nature, size, and scale of that FSP. So if an FSP that is a one-man band submits a policy that you can see clearly has been downloaded from somewhere, it is a template, it is a 60-pager policy that does not even relate to its business, and it's not customized to its authorization, where it has 3 products, but it has this policy that just is very broad. That is where we will engage the FSP to ensure that they compile a customized and appropriate policy in relation to its authorized products. So that's the kind of engagement that we actually do take. We've had FSPs that are said to not have certain policies in place. We will refer them to those sections that they need to adhere to. We will give them the guidelines that we need to, and then we afford them the time to remediate. And if they do not, then the appropriate regulatory action is then taken. So based on the type of irregularity that is in place, we then assess the type of irregularity that we will impose. We will not necessarily suspend a license for someone not changing their surname for an entire year. We will then just, afford them time to submit this within the period that we stipulate. And then if over more, enough engagements, we see that this FSP is not, is not interested in engaging with the FSCA, then we may revoke its license. So we do not take the harshest measure on something that, can be easily remediated. It is only when FSPs show unwillingness to remediate that we will then take harsher measures. Okay, so with the submission considerations, I think I've touched on this to say that if this FSP is your own FSP, then you will go through the normal channel of the e-portal, where you submit this through the e-portal as compliance officer for FSP 1123, right? And then this particular irregularity will be dealt with by the phase supervision department. So phase supervision department ordinarily also includes the financial the investment providers as well. So as an entire will include the financial the investment providers as well. So all those that go through the channel of the compliance officer of the FSP will then be addressed by the analyst that is actually linked to that particular FSP. Then if a compliance officer submits an irregularity that is for another FSP, this irregularity will be dealt with by the complaints department. However, they will liaise with the analyst that is linked to that particular FSP to gather any further information on the FSP that may be existing that the analyst is aware of, because they would have more interactions with the more interactions with the FSP as a result of the supervisory activities that they conduct on a daily basis. When making a report and having given regard to the facts of the report, the compliance officer should proceed should proceed to complete a material irregularity report, which can be accessed on the FSCA website under the phase tab, and sign the declaration form accordingly. So I will unpack what the contents of that irregularity report needs to actually cover. So it needs to have a certain number of things. You need to ensure that according to that form, you have completed everything and nothing is left uncompleted or blank. And the declaration form is something that we always have to follow up with the compliance officer, where we have to ask them to actually sign that declaration form, because we cannot take the contents of the irregularity report seriously if you have not put your name or your signature on it. And once the report is submitted to the FSCA, an automated receipt will be sent to the compliance officer. Also will be sent to the compliance officer, and the compliance officers are also requested to ensure that they do get a reference number that is generated that they can follow up on, that they can actually see that the irregularity is linked to the correct FSP, that you did not have a typo and type in FSP 123 when it was supposed to be FSP 124. So just make sure at the end of it, when the automated response is generated, that you are still comfortable that the irregularity is correct and factual for the FSP that you have lodged the irregularity for. Because you may find that you have two irregularities and you cross the others, and in that instance, that is where you can cross-check yourself just to ensure that you have submitted the correct information for the correct FSP. To the next one. So now when we get to the contents of the irregularity report, so this is what you need to ensure that you have covered in your irregularity report, the personal details, your personal details as compliance officers, and you need to then also alert us if this is an irregularity that is immediately reported, or if it's a delayed reporting. So meaning if it's immediate, meaning it is a material irregularity that you have to report now. If it was a delayed reporting, it would refer to matters that are not as material. However, based on the amount of time that you have given the FSP, you have noted apathy on the FSP's side in actually remediating this non-compliance, and as a result, you are lodging this irregularity as a delayed reporting because you became aware at an earlier stage and you afforded the FSP time to remediate, and they did not. So you need to also alert us of the category of the irregularity that you are lodging, whether it relates to the licensing, whether it relates to the product, whether it is financial, whether there's litigation matters that are involved, whether it relates to client funds and segregation of funds not being conducted, or the client funds being utilized unlawfully to cover the expenses of the FSP. So you need to give us as much detail as possible so that when we do then impose the regulatory action, that we ensure that it is appropriate. Because if you give us little information, we may be unaware of other material issues that exist and may not be able to actually issue the appropriate appropriate details. You need to then give us the details of the irregularity, including all the occurrences and the communications that you've had between yourself and the FSP, the date of the occurrence or the date of discovery. So when the irregularity started, if you don't know when it started, then you give us also the date of the discovery of the irregularity. And then it's also important to, to alert us if you have informed the key individual or not. Because in some instances, you may find that you are uncomfortable in reporting in alerting the key individual of the irregularity, because you feel that you may actually be giving the key individual time to actually fix, to actually hide, or not necessarily fix, hide a material irregularity that should not have been hidden. So where the irregularity especially relates to matters of dishonesty, lack of integrity, and good standing, those are irregularities where you may find that it may be prudent for you not to inform the key individuals, because chances are, as part of their, dishonest nature, they may try to hide these transgressions that you have now brought to our attention. So just ensure that you also apply your discretion in what might assist the FSCA in addressing any irregularity, whether reporting it to the FSP might assist us better, or whether not reporting might assist us as an authority better, because then it gives us a chance to investigate anonymously, conduct desk-based assessments, and check with product providers and many other parties that are involved with the FSP before we can start engaging with the FSP, so that by the time the FSP is aware, we have already gathered enough evidence to ascertain if this dishonesty is truly taking place, if it was suspected, if it is truly taking place, and if it is actually taking place and you are truly assured that it is taking place and there's evidence of such, then we gather more evidence for us to ensure that we take the appropriate level of regulatory action. So you must also ensure that you attach the supporting documents to the irregularity where this is applicable. The declaration form. Now, this is the form that you need to sign, and will accompany your irregularity report and supporting documents. So on this declaration form, we require your practice number, your name, your practice name, your identity number as an individual, the name of the FSP that is involved, as well as the FSP number, especially where perhaps the trading name is not the same as the name on the actual PTY name or the CC name. The declaration must be signed and dated, so you need to show us when you actually signed this irregularity report. And then again, you must also then sign on the contents of the irregularity reports as well. And then, okay, so this next section will be what will be tackled by my colleague Martha, but we will tackle this after the Q&A as well as the break that we will have. We will now open the question for the Q&A for you to just ask questions that I may not have covered in the session, and then we will try to address your questions to the best of our abilities. So you may start raising your hands, and Zinhle will then coordinate the Q&A for us, and then we will address it accordingly.
Billy, we have given you mic access. The floor is yours. You can unmute and then take the floor.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Morning, Shireen. Just a comment maybe, and then just quick two questions. Just firstly, with regarding to the KISA guidelines on irregularity reporting, to the best of my knowledge, that was left in draft. I'm not aware that KISA has actually formally published something. If maybe there is somebody from KISA in the meeting, then maybe they can comment on that. But I accept that ourselves and most of our competitors still use it on that basis, but I don't think it was formally issued. So maybe just a correction on that. Then in the slides, you mention a compliance officer making a report regarding another FSP. In other words, not an FSP it isn't approved as the compliance officer for. I'm not sure under what circumstances that would occur or whether that would be a requirement, because I mean the reading of the Act is, if you substitute compliance of auditor with compliance officer, it refers to the one that you're approved for, the one that you're responsible for. So I'm not. The first question is, under what circumstances would a compliance officer be required to submit a irregularity report in respect of a FSP for which they are not a compliance officer? And then the second question is, and maybe I'll just ask them both now and you can answer them separately, is the question, I don't know if it's going to be dealt with later, but one of the things that remain a problem is short-term breaches in liquidity requirements, and whether a irregularity report needs to be submitted for that every time it occurs, or whether the FSCA has got a view on that. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Billy. Thank you so much for your question. So with regards to, sorry, you started with?
So firstly,
okay. Thank you for the correction on the KISA one. Thank you for that correction.
Yeah. Okay.
So in that instance, then please scrap what we have said. The examples that we have included in this reportable events section is what you will refer to as part of your guidelines. And if there's any other thing that you may have questions on, perhaps that is not on the guidelines or reportable events that we have outlined there, you are welcome to actually engage with any of the analysts that you have access to ask if a certain matter may be regarded as an irregularity. So where you are unclear, you are welcome to actually liaise with us and check if something is an irregularity. And then with regards to a compliance officer reporting something that may not, with reporting a non-compliance of a FSP that is not their own. Say, for instance, you have left an FSP. And you have been, taken out of the FSP, bullied out of the FSP. In that instance, you are no longer compliance officer in that FSP. You used to be. So that would be an instance where you would, that's one, right? Number two is if you are aware of another FSP, say, that is in dealings with the FSP that you are working with, and they are conducting themselves in a manner that is unethical, and you have actually noted that their compliance officer is also turning a blind eye to some of these transgressions, you are welcome to actually alert us of an FSP that is not properly supervised by the said compliance officer. And then in that instance, you are actually also alerting us to two things. You are alerting us to compliance officers who are not doing their job as expected. And then you are also alerting us of a compliance matter that exists that you became aware of as part of your supervision of your own FSP that you are now aware that is not being addressed by that compliance officer. Obviously, it is not your job to be your brother's keeper. When I say your brother, meaning your fellow compliance officer.
Yes.
However, as compliance officer, you've taken an oath to actually assist the industry participants in adhering to the law and assisting the FSCA in supervising those laws. So it helps where you become aware of something that we may not have sight of for you to actually bring our attention to it. In that instance, if you feel that you don't even want to carry it in that, you don't even want to report it in that, because remember, it's an inquiries line that is for complaints. If you just relay it and then you say that you do not have any further information and you will not be able to engage further. So you just alert us to the fact and we will conduct our own investigations. And if we have enough information to go on, then we will carry that ourselves and we will not do a back and forth with you in such a manner where you are now because I suppose the question is alluding to now effort that you have to give to an FSP that you are not providing services for. So in that manner, we will
thank
not
you.
bother
I understand the context. I was just wanting to make clear that your obligation to make to file IRs is in respect of the FSPs that you approved of. My last question was just regarding the liquidity requirements and IRs on those, but I'm not sure if that's maybe going to be dealt with in the next session or not.
It will be dealt with. Thank you, Billy. It will be dealt with the liquidity as and when it occurs. If the FSP, remember, it's not just up to you to to report. If the FSP has alerted us that, guys, we are having an issue with our liquidity requirements during the year, and they have reported, because that's the requirement from FSPs themselves, that as and when they realize that they are contravening any any requirement of the Act, of the fit and proper requirements to be financially sound or meet their working capital requirements or their liquidity requirements, they need to alert us. Whether it's early signs, it's at early signs stage, or whether it actually is now a contravention, the FSP needs to alert us. So as a compliance officer, you may not need to necessarily even lodge an irregularity. You may also just advise them that, guys, this is an instance where you actually alert the FSCA, and let them inform us. And where they don't inform us, that's only when then you can inform us that you have alerted the FSP to inform us of such a transgression, and they have not done so. Okay. We will take the next question. Thank you, Billy.
Leonardo, you have been given mic access. You can unmute and then take the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. I think it's very useful for me. My question relates to anonymity. So there's two modes of submitting an irregularity report. One, as Thandiwe, you've noted, one with the knowledge of the FSP or key individual, and one without the knowledge. When reporting something without the knowledge of the FSP, I've got a grave concern that the compliance officer's anonymity in this whole process can be compromised. And I just wanted to understand what protections we have as compliance officers when submitting these reports. And I'll just give you a practical example. And in the e-portal, when looking at an FSP's profile, there is a section for irregularity reports, and you can click on there and see the history of irregularity reports. So we've seen this when we've taken over an FSP from another practice, and there's an irregularity report. Now, I'm not sure whether that was with the knowledge of the FSP or without the knowledge of the FSP. Key individuals also have access to that portal. Look, the question is not really around the portal, but more around, in an instance where you're doing something without the knowledge of the FSP, what whistleblower protections are there? Because you might stay on and assist the FSCA in an investigation, or it might be useful. But really, that's really my question, and I just wanted to know if there were any controls around that from the authority in terms of protecting, especially when the investigation, let's say, begins, and the analyst may contact the FSP and says, we've received an irregularity report. It can only come from two places, and one is the auditor and one is the compliance officer. So I'm just concerned about the about being exposed, let's say.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Leonardo, for your question. I see Martha's hand is up. Martha, the floor is yours. I'm sure you want to answer Leonardo's question.
Yes, Leonardo. Actually, on my next presentation, I was going to touch on that. But to answer the question, we actually have a tip of anonymous for instances like that. Because we know that also when it comes to those internal compliance officers, due to the work employer-employee relations, it might not be easy for internal compliance officers, even external compliance officers, to report a certain irregularities. So there are instances where you can report this through tip of anonymous, and then once you do that, it will be allocated to a certain analyst or department will be able to deal with the submission of the irregularity in question.
Right,
and obviously, when it comes to tip of anonymous, obviously the confidentiality of the person who reported it's taken seriously.
I appreciate that, thank you. But how do we as compliance officers then protect ourselves from our duty to report, because it'll be anonymous? And so in the face of the FSCA, we may be seen to be complicit because the complaint is coming anonymously. I don't know.
Leonardo, it's Shireen.
Hi, Shireen.
It's actually a really interesting question that you are asking. So the protection is offered in terms of the legislation, because there is a direct obligation on you while you are the compliance officer on record for the FSP to report. And as was mentioned earlier by some of our speakers, it's a must, not a may. So when it is a must in terms of legislation, then you don't have a choice. If you come across something that should be reported, and that's why we're trying our best with this session to talk about what is a material irregularity, because not everything needs to be reported, but there certainly is quite a lot that should be reported to us. So when you have a situation like that, you then must follow the legislation, because the absence of following the legislation is going to also create a legal situation for you. What you can do when you submit the report is ask that we deal with you in confidence, and we will do our level best to find ways to protect you from any repercussions. I cannot promise that there will not be any repercussions, but we have had situations in the past where people who've provided us with information have asked that we deal with it very circumspectly and that we must protect their identity, and we have done that.
Thank you, Shireen.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Shireen. Thank you very much, Leonardo. Marcus, you have been given mic access. Please and unmute and take the floor. Marcus, you've been.
Thank you, Nda. Thank you for giving me the time again. This induction course, like I call it induction course about the regulatory report. In my case, when it comes to my compliance, I'm not mentioning him or her. They periodically give me tasks to complete and ask me this type of questions. What is this? Or what are you doing in terms of this? But now, coming to FSCA or FSCA, this kind of induction that we are being given, is it going to be a once-off? Because I see it involves a lot of things. My second question is, what about other, somewhere earlier on it was said you are managing close to 10,000 FSP. What about those other 10,000 or more FSP that are not attending right now? How are they going to be reached? Because I see we need to, this need to be an ongoing thing. How is it going to, how are you going to touch them? Like myself, you touched me, you told me that I must also go to the website to see the slides and all the like. But what about those other ones? Because this matter of irregularity report, I'm telling you, it is the most, although there are some issues that you do, but how are you going to do it?
Thandi, I see your hand is up. You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marcus. Just want to remove my hand there. Marcus, so prior to these sessions that we are conducting virtually, we used to actually have workshops and roadshows that we actually ran throughout the country. So we do have a capacity building team that actually goes to different cities and to rural areas and to the middle of town, to different places, different provinces. They travel across the country. That's their day-to-day job, where they actually inform FSPs of their requirements, their compliance requirements and authorization requirements. So as an FSP, when you get licensed, the licensing conditions are there. You are provided with the licensing conditions and the things that you need to adhere to. And you need to ensure that, sorry, I'm hearing an echo and I just want to mute. Okay. And you need to ensure that you are actually looking through those documentations and things that you have, and you keep yourself updated with all the things that are required from you. So we do have teams that go around, and this communication pertaining to this workshop was actually sent to all the FSPs. And when the YouTube video is going to be saved, it will be sent to all FSPs. Now it is up to FSPs to obviously take the initiative to actually go in and read. We can give the information and we can make it available, but we cannot make the people take it in, and we cannot make the people go to that information and read it. So we can only conduct these as regularly as we used to. So in the past, they used to be physical. They would be at our offices and in different stations, and they would be communicated, and people would, in the same manner that they did now, register for those events. So when you can't make the event, find out from the website and then watch the video. So that is something that will remain the responsibility of the FSPs to follow up on. And thank you so much. I'm glad that this session is actually helping, and I hope that more FSPs actually see this as an eye-opener for things that they may not have known are actually contraventions, and now they actually work on making sure that all those things are in place. And for the unauthorized FSPs, I know there's questions around that. For people who are not authorized, those people are being action is being taken against those FSPs. As someone who's on the ground, you may not know what activities are actually occurring in the background and what the FSCA is doing as part of the supervisory activities. However, the ones that that we do come across, whether of our own accord as analysts, or whether as from tip-offs, or any person who has sent these complaints to us, we do follow up on those and take appropriate action. And then there's also another question I saw in the chat box where they say where someone said that they find issue with the where we say that there are instances where you do not have to tell the where the FSP does not have to alert the compliance officer. If it may have been a role, a misstatement on my side, I meant for the compliance officer. So there are instances where the compliance officer might not need to alert the FSP or the key individual, where they feel that alerting them may actually give them room to actually conduct more unlawful acts. Marcus, I hope I've answered your question there. If we have, please just indicate if we have, and then if we have not, we'll move on to the next. If we have, we'll move on to the next one.
Thank you very much. Ndoribu.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy. Thank you very much, Marcus. I will just quickly hand over to Akashen, who just quickly wants to share something. Over to you, Akashen.
Thanks, Zinhle. Leonardo, just to give you a little bit more comfort, if you have to lodge an irregularity against an FSP that you're not a compliance officer for, on the e-portal, the compliance officer can see, rather the FSP can see that an irregularity has been submitted. However, they can't see who submitted that irregularity, and it does not give the content of that irregularity. I hope that will help.
Andre, please go ahead. We've given you access to the mic, and then we have a hand from Sam, and then we're going to continue with the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. And we really appreciate the information that will be given by FSCA here. Just want to highlight also one issue that they had, and then that has not been resolved by FSCA even up to now. The situation that I had that we reported to FSCA is about a certain guy who's a pastor, who is a qualified CA and a SAICA member, and he had registered business, and he was an FSCA, he was an FSP. This person came to the members of the church, and then he asked them to deposit, to set up an investment that is better than almost Swarts and Sanlam and whatever. And then he said these people must give him monies. they give him 1 million rands, 500,000 rands, 300,000 rands. That was supposed to be invested. Then they did that, and then he told them, also quoting the word of God, that they must never tell even their husbands that he has taken their money to invest them somewhere. Then this has been from 2016 up to now. They've been waiting for investment to mature. That was nothing like investment. And again, is that there is nothing that was invested. The companies that he said he has registered were never registered. They were registered in his name only, not in the name of all these people that he told that they were going to form a company. The matter was brought to the attention of FSCA, of FIG, of SAICA, of the Hawks, and it also appeared on the NCA. But still now, this guy is still free. He has taken these people's monies. He has built very big churches. Also had to go to Crossat and see the church. He has built he has invested in a lot of properties. But currently, the poor people are still waiting for the monies to be recovered from this person. And nothing has been. SAICA, I also wrote SAICA personally to report him to SAICA. SAICA does acknowledged that, but nothing has been done. Now, in that case, what else are these victims supposed to be doing then, apart from what they've tried to do now? Because that is really another example of highly irregular behavior by certain people using the word of God. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. I agree. When we see things that are wrong, it is very worrying. Have you, I'm sorry, you gave quite a lot of detail, but did you report this to the FSCA? Akashen has typed our complaints inbox details in the chat function. So if you haven't reported this, or if you reported it and you haven't heard anything back and it's been quite a while, please do send us an email for the first report or a follow-up email to the complaints inbox email address that is in the chat function, and your details if you want us to contact you again, and then we will follow up and come back to you. Thank you. Zinhle, over to you.
Thank you very much for that, Shireen. We will now move over to our last speaker. Norman, I can see your hand. We'll just quickly give you mic access because time is really not on our side for you to quickly ask your question or pose your comment. Can you kindly unmute and take the floor, and then we will move to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Norman.
I've noticed what this presentation is all about, and I've noticed there's a lot of talk about auditors and compliance officers and so on, and I didn't watch the first 10 minutes. I am not sure whether this presentation is for sole traders without compliance officers. Can I just get an answer on that, please?
Sorry, this session is for all FSPs, because we need to get irregularity reporting when there is a material irregularity in an FSP. So this session is not aimed at sole proprietors without compliance officers only. It is aimed at every single person who has an FSP license, or a person who is an auditor with FSPs as clients, or compliance officers with FSPs as clients. So we are addressing the broad spectrum of players in the industry.
I see. All right. And is there anything that we have to do or complete, or apart from irregularity reporting as such? Because
So
self-traders, we don't collect money, and I know I've been watching this whole thing, and most of this is not applicable to me.
Well, irregularity reporting would be applicable to your entity, because if you as a sole proprietor come across something that you have not dealt with in the business, there's also your obligation to notify us. But I think what would be most useful is if you could type your FSP number and your email address or your telephone number, whichever one you prefer, in the chat function, we are going to get your analyst, because for every FSP, we have an analyst. We work on a portfolio management approach. We can then get your analyst to make contact with you individually, and they can then help you to understand exactly what are your compliance obligations in terms of the legislation.
That would be wonderful. Thank you very much. It's just
Pleasure.
that my hand has been on up and down the whole morning. There is no chat box. I cannot see a chat box anywhere on the screen.
So Norman, give me your FSP number.
8174.
8174. Okay, so what we are going to do, we are going to get the analyst who looks after your FSP, because we can get your contact details from your FSP details on our system, and
Yes.
we will then make contact with you individually.
I'd really appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. And this offer is open to any other FSP compliance officer or auditor in the audience who would like to engage us separately. We are most welcome to give us your details in the chat function, and we are happy to contact you. We are going to continue with the presentation now.
Martha, over to you. John, we can see your hand. Due to time constraints, we will give you a chance to ask your question after the next presentation. Martha, over to you.
Excuse me, I was on mute. Before I start, I just like to make opening remarks and just reiterate some of the information that my colleagues have made. So I need to highlight again that the irregularity reports apply to both internal and external compliance officers. And then regarding the internal compliance officers, I think what we have picked up is that we're not actually getting this irregularity reports from internal compliance officers. I think perhaps the challenge might be that because of the employer-employee relations, but I think it's important for internal compliance officers to bear in mind that even though you are employed by the FSP, you have an obligation as an approved phase compliance officer to report the IRs to the authority. And also, as the previous speakers alluded to, it's not a may, it's a must that this must be reported to. So it's an appeal to the internal compliance officers to that they report this to the authorities. And then also another challenge I think that the internal compliance officers come across is that the business or the FSPs are more focused on profits than the compliance issue of things. So it's the responsibility of the compliance officer to actually instill compliance culture in the organization. So once you start reporting this IRs and the institutions are actually getting, queries from us as the authority that we received irregularity reports, I think there'll be that shake up within, the FSPs that, we must start taking compliance seriously. And then another thing I like to highlight is that when performing compliance duties, the internal compliance officer and also the external ones should actually wear two hats. It's the industry compliance officer ahead and the regulator head. So when you wear both those hats, when you're approaching your monitoring duties or your compliance duties, you're able to ask yourself, okay, how would the regulator view this? How would they approach this? Should the regulator be aware of this? I think that would always be a guideline to the compliance officer in approaching the performing the compliance duties. And then I think also when I'm going to do the presentation and highlight what are material irregularity reportable issues, it's going to help the compliance officers to actually enhance the monitoring processes. I think gone are the days of the tick box approach. It should be a thing of the past. And it gives, that in-depth monitoring of the compliance. I'd like to highlight also, like one of the colleagues said, that the compliance officers are the ones who actually on the ground dealing with the FSPs. Please bear in mind also that we actually regulate approximately 10,000 FSPs, and we used a risk-based supervision approach. We cannot go to inspect each and every FSP, and as such, we do not, have oversight or all the non-compliance issues that the FSPs have out there. So we rely on the compliance officers who are more on reach of this FSPs to actually report the non-compliance, material non-compliance matters to us, to the authority. So moving to the next, to the actual examples and what the material issues are, you'll notice it's actually 44 of them. And I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just highlighting those that are quite, important, like the previous speaker said, and during the chat box, the slides will be shared so the compliance officers will get an indication of what material irregularity reports need to be reported to the authority. I'm going to switch off my camera now. Thank you. So on the first one, you'll notice that it says an FSP continue to conduct business after its authorization has been refused, suspended, withdrawn, or after authorization has voluntarily lapsed. I think this one talks to the question that Billy had, to the question that how do you report when you're not linked to the FSP, when you're no longer part of the FSP? Because here it refers to the license being refused, being suspended, withdrawn, or after the authorization has been lapsed. So is that message going back to say, compliance officers, we really need to get to know the information of non-compliance from the compliance officers. So whatever information you come across, whether you've come, the license has been refused, suspended, withdrawn, or whether the license has been lapsed, you come across any material non-compliance, inform the authority. It can be through the measure of complaint, as Thandiwe explained how it goes through, and then the compliance department will deal with that also, or it will be allocated. If they can't deal with it, it will be allocated to the analyst in the supervision department. And then going to the one on number 4, like I indicated, I won't be going through each one of them. It says an FSP purporting to be licensed to render financial services as an authorized FSP in respect of a product. That product, if that product is not defined in the FACE Act, and that authorization of the FSP is thus not relevant to services being rendered in respect of such a product. So I think the recent one, I'll make an example regarding crypto asset. We know previously it wasn't a financial asset, and most FSPs, they would have an FSP license, and they will still, use crypto asset. So they will purport to use FSP license to actually for crypto asset. So before it was declared a product, then it would, the FSP having a license, they would render a financial services with a product that is not authorized by the FSP. And it's unfortunate, because customers out there, they think when you have a license, an FSP license, that the FSP is kosher, that they can sell any product they want to. They're not aware that for an FSP to render financial service, you have to be authorized for a particular service. And then I will move to number 5, which says representatives rendering financial services on behalf of FSPs in respect of product which or she is not appointed to. This one relates to section 773. So at FSP, when you conduct financial services with an FSP rendering financial services, you have to be, that FSP has to be authorized for that particular product. The one that you, the other one is the, excuse me, it's just that I made notes on the other one. So it's non-compliance with licensing conditions, which is number 8. I think this one is a common one. We pick it up a lot during the desk-based supervision, which is the analysis of financial statements, where you find that there's a change of shareholders, there's a change of auditors, there's a change of directors, and this, you know, we find the information on our records, the FSP was last updated in 2010, 2008, and obviously when you check the information on the financial statement, it differs differently. So you'll notice that it's even so important that it's part of the proposed Omni-CBR that you ask questions to actually request information if there's any changes in the shareholders or auditors or directors, because we've come across a lot of interests where FSPs don't comply with the licensing conditions, that changes must be made within 15 days. Thanks. Next slide, please. And then I think before before I go to the next slide, I just made another new additions. We got a query from another compliance officer yesterday, where, you know, there's an issue of people where appointing persons who are rendering financial services, but they are not appointed as representatives, just like key individuals and, you know, representatives. No one can render financial services without being appointed as a representative. So if compliance officers come across such cases, for example, if people are involved in claims or are performing intermediary service or advice, these persons should be appointed as representatives, and the authority should be aware of these persons. The rep register of the FSP and the authority should be in agreement also. So if there's that discoloration, the compliance officer should report these instances to us. And then before to the next one, I'd like to also add that as part of the queries, I'll be adding on, they're not part of the presentation, but because of the query we got yesterday, there will be add-ons also. And then the other one is about documented policies and procedures that are not in place within reasonable time after licensing and or regulation change. I think it's a given that policies and procedures are important in any institution, let alone an FSP, and it's part of the requirements that there should be documents in policies in place. And if you might have noticed during the licensing process, it's even required now when you apply for a license, that it's no longer a tick box to say, do you have a business continuity? Do you have this? Do you have that? Our licensing department actually require the actual policies, like your business continuity, your governance structure, to actually see that you have these in place. So when an FSP is authorized, after authorization, they should make sure that after a certain time, all the phase procedures and policies are in place and are documented. And the other thing I'd like to highlight to the compliance officers or the FSP for that matter is, it doesn't help to say, okay, when doing monitoring, that it's also a tick box. Do you have a business continuity? Yes. Do you have a succession? Yes. It's also checking the implementation of the documents in place. Are they implementing the processes as documented? So I think it's going that extra length of ensuring that the policies, procedures that are in place are implemented. There's no point having something in place yet you're not implementing it. It's just a matter of having it documented as a tick box exercise. Okay. And then going to the next slide on number 9. Sorry, no, still on number 9. Thank you. False or misleading declaration in respect of fit and proper status of key individuals. We know that during the licensing process, this is also checked, but also during the monitoring, you know that the key individuals, they normally do complete that checklist to say any honesty and integrity declaration that is checked. And also, if you pick up any false or misleading declaration, I think it's a red flag from our side. This needs to be reported to the authority also. So also bear that in mind, so that it's also not a sort of a tick box, that you actually check this when doing the monitoring. And then moving to number 10, it's the non-compliance of jurisdictions. Sorry, moving to number 11, it's non-compliance of juristic representatives with phase requirements. So I think this one is it's quite a concern also for the authority, because you get a lot of FSPs that have juristic representatives, and they don't actually monitor what these representatives do, because also they can't get licenses on their own. So what they do, they get under the already authorized FSP. So if the compliance officers, they pick up any non-compliance in these instances of juristic representative to actually report it to us, because this is where the most, I think, non-compliance can come through if you are an FSP that has juristic representatives. Because I think juristic representatives, they think that the focus is more on the FSP that holds the license, which is true, but more focus should also be on juristic representatives. And I think it's more stringent now, because when you look at the fit and proper requirements, I think some of those requirements really apply to juristic representatives. So when you're doing monitoring, please consider that you extend also, you visit those juristic representatives, you inspect their files, thorough monitoring should be done on those juristic reps. And any non-compliance material breach should be reported to us also. The other one that we look regarding juristic representatives, that we got a query from the compliance officer yesterday, is that also it's the signing of the letter of authority. Most of the documents or Section 13 documents, remember who holds the license is the FSP and not the juristic rep. So all the documents and all the section letter of authority or Section 13 letter should make reference to the FSP, because now as a client, you're meeting this entity, and then they think that the entity has an FSP license, but the juristic has a license, but the entity that is the license holder is actually not the juristic head. So it's those kind of things that the compliance officer need to monitor, so that the customer whom we are concerned about knows who they're actually dealing with. They should know that the juristic rep does not hold the license and they're acting as a juristic representative. And then moving to the number 13, it's FSP preventing its compliance officer from performing the functions of a compliance officer. I think this one is quite common in the industry out there, especially for small FSPs, where, and even for maybe for other larger FSPs where there's no compliance culture, where the just it's profit or business focused. You know, if there's a culture that, you know, the compliance officer cannot perform its function, it's really a problematic FSP. You cannot perform your duties as a compliance officer. Please report that to us, because it's really a concern for us. If the FSP is the responsibility of the FSP that they are compliant with legislation. Now, as you as the compliance officer can't do that, and you are picking up issues regarding it, it's the duty of the compliance officer to report to us. So if you come across, as a compliance officer, you come across instances where you can't perform your compliance, your duties as a compliance officer, that needs to be reported to the authority. Okay, and then going to number 15 and number 16, it's regarding the Council for Medical Schemes. So we know that we cannot, a representative cannot render financial services without the accreditation of Council for Medical Scheme. Just as much as an FSP cannot render financial services without the accreditation from the Council for Medical Schemes. So if the compliance officer is conducting the monitoring and then they come across that the Council for Medical Scheme accreditation of the FSP or the representative has expired, this is a material reportable irregularity. Please also notify us in this instance. Next slide, please. And then going to the next slide, you'll notice that most of them relate to actually the General Code of Conduct. Excuse me. Okay, I think the most important one, you can see it's number 20, non-compliance with handling of client funds, money premiums held on behalf of clients. This is quite important. We've seen quite a lot on the news. We've seen on the complaints. Also now, just one of the attendees alluded to that there's a pastor who was taking money from clients. So it's quite a serious one. If you pick up any issues where there's issues, there's no non-compliance to handling of client funds, like no separate bank account, intermingling of the FSP's funds with the FSP's operational bank account, that needs to be reported to us. And also the issues of premiums. I think there was one question where the FSP receives premiums and these premiums are not paid over to the insurer. I mean, that is a risk on its own, because remember, the insurer would see that the premiums are not paid. So there's a possibility that actually should a claim arise, then the claim would not be paid, because it would appear from the insurer that the premium has not been received from the client. So this really is a huge concern in respect of market conduct for the clients out there. So if there's anything that you pick up regarding this, and another thing I'd like to highlight to the compliance officers or to the FSPs is that when you're doing the monitoring, please also look at the Section 19.3 reports that the auditors prepare, and check those, whether there are any findings on the Section 19.3 reports, and then whether there's any issues to be concerned about this the audit report, so that you get a feel of what is going on in the finances of the FSP. And also, as mentioned previously, please engage with the auditors, engage with the accounting officers, engage with the compilers of the FSPs, because remember, also the obligation of the compliance officer is that you must ensure that the FSP complies with all the or laws applicable. So if you engage with the auditors or the accountant, you get an understanding of what are the issues are. Instead, and some of the things that you need to be aware of. The one I would like to move to also, it's number 21. I think non-compliance with complaints handling requirements. This, I think it's non-debatable. It's really important when it comes to customers. Complaints handling requirements. Any non-complaint requirements, first thing is, obviously you can have a complaints register, you can have complaints handling process, but are they implementing it? How long is it taking for them to actually respond to complaints lines? Are they, the code of conduct has processes that needs to be followed. Are they following those processes to ensure that the client complaints are addressed accordingly? So it's even so important that complaints are so important that even included in the proposed Omni-CBR a section to say, how does the FSP deal with complaints? What type of complaints are they getting? Then they're able to pick up the trends from there. So if they're non-compliance to complaints handling processes, it's also a good market conduct indicator, and also remember a TCF principle. So if there are any non-compliance to that, these need to be reported on RIs. And then moving to number 22, non-compliance with termination of agreements or business requirement. This is quite important because we've seen in the industry we've seen a trend where this is not really adhered to. And we've seen a lot, we've come across queries, we've come across exemption applications, which we do not, I should have mentioned that. We've come across, FSPs who do bulk transfers, who would ask about bulk transfers. This is against the termination of agreements of business, because before you do bulk transfers, you need to get the authorities. Okay, bulk transfer actually are not supposed to be happening. When a business is sold or there are acquisitions, there are mergers, the movement of clients from one FSP to another, you need to get written confirmation from the client. So if that is not done, that is non-compliance in terms of termination agreement or business requirement. So that is really quite important. The practice in the industry regarding bulk transfer, it's frowned upon as the regulator. So if you come across it, please notify us. Okay, and then moving to number 24, non-compliance with services under supervision. I think this one it's really also a concern for the authority, because you find that people are given. Excuse me, sorry, I just got a message. People are under supervision, and then they have there are no contracts, there are no evidence of supervision. So if this is the place, and the concern as an authority is that you need to, you're not sure as to know what kind of representative are giving advice out there to the customers. Okay, and then I'll just move quickly, being mindful of the time. And then regarding financial soundness requirements, I think we do get the reports, but regarding whether it's, regarding, we get the liquidity mostly. So if we can also get regarding working capital and the solvency, you'll notice that also highlight regarding insolvency, declaration, and also financial soundness early warning. So these need to be reported to us. And then also bear in mind the FSP cannot continue being an FSP if these are under the they're not, if they're under solvency, liquidity, or business rescue. And then moving to the next slide. Can you please move to the next slide? Okay, and then I'm just going to highlight a few, just be mindful of time. The ones that I would like to highlight is the number 34, non-compliance with nominees and administrative and discretionary FSP requirements. This is, I think, when it comes to Cat 2s, Cat 2As, and Cat 3s, I think the IRs are really not forthcoming. I'm not sure whether is it because they are compliant or is it because of the type of monitoring that's done. So it's something to look into by the compliance officers in terms of the code of conduct being looked into. The other one, when it's 36, it's the client mandate breaches by this FSPs. So it's if part of the monitoring should be that whether there are any mandate breaches by the FSPs, these should also be reported to us. The other one I like to highlight that's not on the list is the IT policies, procedures, and processes. So for any entity, there should be policies in place for IT, and take into account the risk we've come across like cyber, ransomware, and data breaches. Please report this when the FSPs are cyber attacks, ransomware, and data breaches. And I think I'll go to the last one, that any undesirable practices by the FSP. So if the compliance officers pick up any undesirable practices by the FSP, please report them to us also. I think I'll just stop there and then hand over to Zinhle or the Q&A. Thank you.
Martha, thank you so much for the insightful session. As you mentioned, due to time constraints, we'll just have to move over to Akashen for beneficial ownership. So if time allows, we will we'll open the floor for questions and answers. But then if we can't do that, can you kindly type your questions, and then we will get back to you after our session. Over to you, Akashen.
Thank you so much, Zinhle. Okay, I'm just gonna take the share from my colleague, and I'm gonna share the slides quickly. Okay, so as everybody is aware, on the 12th of August, the FSCA sent out an information request for the collection of beneficial ownership, and this was recommended by a global watchdog company called FATF. I'm not going to go into who FATF is and what they do. We would post the communication that was sent out in the chat, so one can download it there and have a look as to who FATF is and what they actually do, and the reason why we're requesting this information. So the collection of beneficial ownership is actually applicable to all FSPs. However, some of them have been excluded, and we've mentioned the exclusions in the slide. So they are the banks, the mutual banks, insurers. This information we will get from the PA because they're regulated by the PA. FSPs that are authorized for non-life insurance and health service benefit products only. This is your subcategories, your 1.2, 1.6, 1.23, and 1.16. If the FSPs are authorized for any of those categories only, they're not required to submit the beneficial ownership. Sole proprietors are excluded because you are the natural person already who is owning your FSP. And partnerships, the information was supplied obviously when the license was approved. The next slide just shows you one of the mandatory documents that is required with the beneficial ownership, and that is an organogram. It's just the basic picture of the ownership of the FSP. So the example there will show you what organogram needs to look like. If you have a simple structure FSP, like it's only a one-man show, then your example of your organogram can look like something like this. That's all that we require from you in terms of the organogram. And then we've also prepared a step-by-step user guide that's hosted on the website to take you through this whole process. That will also be posted in the chat, and then you can go through the user guide there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through a live demo on our testing e-portal and show you how you capture this information for us. So to log on to the e-portal, you'll go to the FSCA website. You will go down to regulated entities, and then under e-services, you click on phase. Okay, when you go to the phase page, you go to phase e-portal, and then you enter your ID number and your password to log on to the portal. Okay, this the logon to this e-portal, as most of the FSPs know, access is only granted to the key individual and the linked compliance officer to this FSP. We've been getting quite a few requests to give people access to the portal. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen because those people are not appointed in those roles that were mentioned. All right, the user guide to the beneficial ownership, it is on this hyperlink. If you click it, the document will download for you in PDF, and then you can read through it. I'm just going to log into the portal quickly and go to the beneficial ownership right at the bottom, and you click on submit. This will be the landing page of the beneficial ownership. All right, again, we've put the hyperlink here to help you get to the user guide if you're stuck completing the information. So here it shows you the regulated entity. This is the FSP's information. As you can see, it's a test FSP we're using. All right. And then what you need to do now, you need to start capturing the ownership for this FSP on the e-portal. And for you to start doing that, you need to click on this tab here where it says new ownership record on this level. All right. Now you're going to declare the ownership of your FSP. As I mentioned earlier on, you might have a simple structure where you're the only person that's running this business and you own 100%, or it could be you have two people, the percentage of the 100% is split 50-50 or 60-40, or you could have a company that's owning a share in your FSP. And this is where it's very important when you select the legal entity type. As you can see from the drop-down menu, we've catered for various beneficial owners. So if you've got a closed corporation that's owning a share in your FSP, you will select closed corporation. If it's a company, you will select company and put in that company information. One of the common errors that we are getting is where the FSP is a closed corporation or a company, but on the legal entity type, they go and select company and then they try and put in the company's information again. And then you get an error on the top of the screen that says it's identical to the registration number is identical to the regulated entity. So in other words, you're trying to tell us the FSP is owning the FSP, and that's not what we're looking for. We want to know who's owning this FSP. So if you remember during the licensing stage when the FSPs were licensed and the forms were completed, on the shareholding part on FSP Form 3, you only said there's a company ABC that's owning a 50% share, but you didn't disclose, or it was not part of the licensing application at that time to say that Akashen Rampersadh is its owning company ABC. You just said company ABC is owning a 50% share, or there's a trust that's owning the 100% of the FSP. But we did not ask at that time for the trustees and the beneficiaries of the trust. But that is what beneficial ownership is doing now. It's asking you to disclose all that information to us. So I'm just going to quickly select one that's going to be easy because of the time. So I'm going to select a closed corporation. I'm going to put in a company name over here. As you can see, it's all test data that we've been using. So So then you put in the percentage of what the company is owning, and then you will select the date obtained, and then you will select the country of jurisdiction. Once that's put in, you will click on submit input, and then the information appears over here. Now this level has to be 100%. This is your first level ownership. It has to be 100%. This is what we call direct ownership. All right. Once you reach 100% over here, you will see that these blocks will open for you to continue and disclose the next ownership level for this company. So I'm going to capture another one, and I'm going to take it to a natural person to show you what happens when you select a natural person. And then I'll show you how you need to go further and capture your the information for the next level ownership. So I'm going to take it to 100%. Okay, email address. There you see, now we've gone to 100% and the next ownership level for the first company has opened up. Next level ownership on the natural person is not open because you cannot get a next level ownership on a natural person. And that is where we want to end with getting the information. It has to end on a natural person's level. So company Rampersadh, it needs to go down to the next level, and here you need to disclose. Now you'll see the related entity is this company. So you need to give us the ownership for this company, and you will do the same thing by clicking on next ownership level, and then you will select who's owning that company. So in that company, there could be another company, or there could be a trust that's owning this company. So you'll put in the information of the trust, and let's say it's 100%. Date owned, and then just put South Africa. Okay, and then submit. All right, now you'll see this next next ownership level open for the trust, because now you need to go down further and tell us who's the trustees and the beneficiaries of this trust. As you can see, data already pulled up because we're using it for testing. So then you need to go on the trust and show us who's owning the trust. And then once you've disclosed all the trustees and beneficiaries, then we will be happy. But as you can see over here, you've got companies that are beneficiaries. So here you'll need to go down again and get to the next level ownership of those companies. Okay, once you've captured all that information and you're happy with what you've captured on the top, you need to upload the organogram. So the organogram, it's simple to upload. There is a block here at the bottom that says organogram. You click on attachments, and you'll click on add new attachment. Then you will click on choose file. You will go to your folder where you've got your attachment saved. And then you will see it will show over here Annexure 1 test document, and then you will click on upload attachment. When the attachment is uploaded successfully, you will get a record ID, you will get organogram, the date the attachment was loaded, and then you know that we have received the attachment successfully. You will then click on back, and you will click log out, and then once we analyze the data, we will send you an email to tell you if it's completed. If it's not completed, we will tell you it's partially completed, and please just read the content of that email, because that email will tell you it's partially completed because the organogram was not loaded, or it's partially submitted because you haven't gotten down to the lowest level of ownership. In the lowest level of ownership, we mean it's natural persons. All right. One other important thing to remember is that on first level, you have to reach 100%. All right. The system will not allow you to go any further if you have not reached 100% on the first level. All right. From second level going on, we have put in an exclusion where if you have a natural person that's owning less than 5% of the business of the company, that information does not need to be disclosed. All right. Guys, I'm sorry, we are run out of time. So I'm not going to be able to take questions, but you can post the questions in the chat, and we will definitely get through the questions this afternoon. I'll hand over back to Zinhle.
Akashen, thank you so much for the beneficial ownership information. As Akashen has mentioned, if you have any questions, please post them on the chat box. We will answer you on the chat box, but unfortunately we have run out of time. And this brings us to the end of our workshop. Thank you for making this session an interactive and insightful one through your active participation. We hope that you will leave the session feeling more empowered on your irregularity reporting requirements and the avenues that are available to you. We wish you a pleasant and restful festive season. Thank you very much. Goodbye.